right, we are on location at the Blaze Studios here in Dallas, Texas. And I'm sitting across from Mr. Blaze, Glenn Beck.
How are you, sir?
How's it going, my man?
Good to see you.
Thank you for letting us do an on-location shoot. I feel...
Not a problem. I know you're here for about 10 minutes, and then I think you're going to probably be on the moon, and then a stop at Mars, and...
You know a little bit about traveling a lot.
I do.
Yeah, so I'm in between 1,000 things here.
It's great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I want to spend a lot of time talking about this book here, Addicted to Outrage, but let's just do everything. Yeah. So right now, we're about 2.5 weeks away from this midterm election. Mm-hmm. I suspect something completely bananas over the next 2.5 weeks. I mean, you can already just see between the Kavanaugh stuff that we've been dealing with, the general outrage and all the things you're writing about here.
So here, I just said this to a group of friends the other day. I think at this point, a spaceship could appear, okay, and hover over New York City, and it'd be like, huh? I mean, I don't know what would surprise me now.
Well, we'd be arguing about the gender pronouns of the aliens, you know.
I know. It's absolutely insane how everything is upside down. Everything is upside down. Do you think we're in a unique time? Because that's one of the questions. When I'm out there with Peterson, often people say, okay, it's, you know, everyone says we've never been more partisan and we're angrier than ever and all of these things. But does something about this seem unique? Yeah. I'm a glutton for history.
Yes.
And we have been in perilous times before. I don't think we've hit the Civil War confrontations yet, but we are approaching it.
Do you think we really are? Because I do. Because I'm actually worried about the amount of people. You see this on Twitter all the time. People saying, "Oh, Civil War is coming." You know, like there's this like murmur about what would be the most horrific possible outcome of all of this.
So remind me to talk about the window, because I think we have a window right now. But we've been worse. I mean, if you look at Jefferson and Adams, you know, Adams was called a hermaphrodite by Jefferson. Jefferson, his campaign called him a hermaphrodite. Adams said back that if you elect Thomas Jefferson, there will be blood in the streets and the heads of our children and your daughters will be on pikes into every town. So we've had rhetoric like this before.
Ironically, I'd be thrilled to vote for either one of those guys.
Now would be like, I'll take either. I don't care.
Heads on pikes, that would be fine. But it all does go to, just in the last couple of weeks, you know, there was this Hillary Clinton line on CNN talking to Christiane Amanpour about how we can't be civil because these people, meaning the conservatives or Republicans, are so against our values. I mean, this is dangerous stuff.
So here's the difference. We have been in these places before, but we knew our founding documents. We knew who we served or who our God was. And I don't know who our God is now. I mean, is it money? Is it fame? Is it anger? I don't know what our God is now. We knew...
Wait, let me pause you there for a sec. So when you say that about what the founders believed, now they were also saying separation of church and state the whole time. So if you were just laying out what they believed, when you say we knew who our God was...
So George Washington, they did believe in the division of church and state. Clearly, I do too.
Yeah.
That just means if you're an atheist, you're an atheist. We're friends. We're cool. Let's get along. But if you're a God person, you do your God thing. You do your atheist thing.
Right.
Do we have what Adam Smith called moral sentiment in common? Yes. Capitalism has lost the first volume of Adam Smith. The second volume is Wealth of Nations. Mm-hmm. The first volume is Moral Sentiments. And that says, look, this is an invisible hand, and the market is powerful, and it will create whatever you want. Be careful what you ask for. Make sure you are always tempering the moral sentiment. Make sure that you're a good, decent, fair-minded people. We've lost that. We're losing it, I should say. And I'm concerned, and I talk about this a bit in the book. I've seen this coming for almost 2 decades, and I have been warning against it. And for the very first time, I'm at the place where I'm on the air now saying, this is the time. This is the time that I said would come.
Yeah.
And now is the time for you to remember who you are. And our outrage is taking us away from it. So as I've looked at this for so long, I have studied revolutions. I've studied giant movements of chaos. I can tell you about, I think it was the Red Month in the 1930s. I can show you what's happened. But there were four people in grand movements that have gotten it right. There was Abraham Lincoln. Mm-hmm. There was Martin Luther King. There was Gandhi. Then there's Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer, do you know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was?
I don't think so.
Okay. Bonhoeffer lost. Okay. Bonhoeffer was a pastor, I think Lutheran in Germany. He was on the air when the Fuhrer declared he was Fuhrer. He was taken, his broadcast was cut short because he was doing a broadcast called The Fuhrer Principle. This is wrong. Don't go this way. On Kristallnacht, the very next morning, he was shopping in those stores, those Jewish stores. Yeah. Pacifist. He tried to turn the Germans back and say, stop it, stop, you're going the wrong way. He couldn't do it. He eventually escaped from Germany, was in New York, not here very long because he felt guilty. How can I leave my country when it's in this much trouble? He went back. He realized nobody's going to stop this guy. Maybe violence is the answer. He was involved in one of the attempts to kill Hitler. He went to a concentration camp. He died. He was executed like 5 days before Hitler died. Wow. Here's the thing. If you read his writings, he's Gandhi, he's Jesus, he's Martin Luther King, he's got it. And I've read him. Why did he fail? Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Not to stand is to stand. He's got it. Love one another. Stop playing the organ so you can hear the train going to Auschwitz, okay? He failed because Germans had already gone over the cliff. They had, because of World War I, then the Treaty of Versailles, then the 1920s, they had already lost their Judeo-Christian principles. They had lost their center. Remember, if it wasn't for England, Gandhi would have failed. People think of Gandhi as starving himself to get the British to comply. No, he starved himself to say to his own people, do not rise up in anger. They were this close to losing, and he knew it. He was appealing to the sense of decency and fairness of the British culture. So he knew the people, because of their Judeo-Christian worldview, would see this oppression and go, that's wrong. If we have a window and it's closing. Yeah. If we give in to our anger, our outrage, and we say, you know what, I can't take it anymore, we will lose. And that window of the Judeo-Christian values will close. And then we're done.
Yeah, it's so interesting because one of the themes that keeps coming up as I'm on this tour is people keep asking me about this. How much worse is it going to get before there's some sort of reset and all of these things? And it's like, man, I don't want 2 months from now or 4 years from now to look back at right before the 2018 elections and go, boy, weren't those the good old days? Because we've gone on the train to hell. So do you think there's actually no way to stop it at this point? Do you think that
I think
the
there
energy
is a way
behind it?
So here's the scenarios that I'm looking at right now. If I'm wargaming, okay? None of these.
I know the prediction business always works out, so let's see what you got here.
So if you're wargaming, let's look at the next election. What happens? Well, the Democrats are probably going to win the House, okay? If they win the House, you know they're going to at least subpoena his tax records. He's not going to give up tax records. That'll be brought to the Supreme Court. Remember that, marker number one. That's day number one. Day number two, they don't have any place they can go on impeachment. They have to impeach him. Even if they don't have anything.
Right, they've already said it, they have to do it.
They have to do it. It'll be the Senate that they'll throw it to the Senate. That's where the trial happens. So impeachment just means we're taking you to court, okay? So that's day number 2. Day number 3, Trump has already filed with the Supreme Court saying, I'm not testifying, I'm not turning over my tax records, I'm not doing this, okay? Well, Kavanaugh has already said he's already seen that, that's a distraction, the president shouldn't have to. So day number 3, when Trump has brought it to the Supreme Court, then the House says, wait a minute, Kavanaugh should recuse himself. We're looking at a year where the 3 branches of government, the administration, plus the House and the Senate, both of them will be fighting with each other. They'll be fighting with this branch, and they'll be fighting with the Supreme Court. When Kavanaugh doesn't recuse himself, they will file articles of impeachment for him.
Mm-hmm. And they're leading all of these ideas already. I mean, these ideas are trickling out already.
This is going to happen.
Yeah.
So now you have the press, the 4th branch, already in chaos, has absolutely no credibility at all.
It's deranged.
And that pushes what you would call the 5th branch or the 1st branch, the people, into the streets. How do you solve that?
All right, so before we get to the streets, can I give you the one option that I think maybe saves us from all that?
Yeah.
Which is that the Republicans win, or at least hold, in the midterms. Thus, finally, as long shot as this is, finally the Democrats go, okay, we've got to drop identity politics. We've got to get away from this socialist, Democrat, socialist nonsense. There's no evidence that they would ever look in the mirror. If anything, they've only doubled down every time.
Yeah,
but I see that as the only out to where you're going with
So
this.
I think if they don't win the House, if you win the House, God forbid if they win the House and the Senate, then it's chaos. But if they win the House, the Democrats, that scenario is going to play out in some form or another. So that just gets worse and worse and worse. I was talking to a friend of mine just last night about this, and he said, just exactly what you said. And I followed it up with what you said. Show me the evidence.
I know, there's no evidence.
I am Spartacus is all of a sudden going to say, okay, I'm not Spartacus.
Yeah.
I'm the carpenter from Nazareth. No.
Wasn't that the danger all along? And this is directly linked to your book. I mean, I remember before the election, I kept saying, and this is when I still considered myself on the left and someone that had basically only voted Democrat my entire life. I think the one time I voted Republican was Bloomberg's 3rd term in New York City after he had flipped like 87 times over or something. I'm not even sure if he was Republican at that point. But that I kept saying before the election, if you keep calling Trump Hitler, then no matter what he does and no matter what reality is, you'll never be able to get yourself out of that little place you've painted yourself. And that's where we are.
So you know what's crazy? I lived this. I said, I'm the guy who got in so much trouble saying, I think Barack Obama may be a racist. Now, I immediately corrected it on the spot and said, that's not quite right. I now understand, I explain it in the book. I now understand how to express that. I wasn't up on anti-colonialism. I certainly wasn't up on postmodernism. Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing all these terms that mean nothing to me, and yet they're always attacking groups. To me, and to a lot of people in the country, that's the definition of racist.
Yeah.
Okay? But I didn't understand the difference.
The other part.
The other part of it. Okay? It's now social justice. Okay? Well, social justice seems wrong to me. That's how I defined it then. That was so divisive when I said that. And I was really, at the time, struggling to figure out what is happening. Who is this guy? And I got more and more strident and didn't make a lot of friends on the left, okay?
Yeah.
It didn't work. My base got stronger. My base learned things, but my base also, as things went on, got more and more angry, as did I. Why isn't this working? Well, because you cannot call people names and expect them to come over. I just saw a new poll today that shows, I think it's 8% of the American public, 8,000 people interviewed, 8% of the American public is the diehard progressive radical, okay? The never give up conservative, traditional conservative, is about 29%, okay? They're both on the edges, 27, 29%, somewhere in that area. Still on the edges. The vast majority is now being called the exhausted class. And it's the class of people, and I'm in this. Guys, it doesn't have to be this way. I'm tired of this. Not everybody is a racist. Not everybody is a homophobe. Stop it. Stop it. The Kavanaugh, Jordan Peterson got into trouble, and I tweeted,
yes, he did.
Tweeted back to him. I think this might be the first time I disagree, but I think because...
Well, for people that didn't see it, basically he said that what would probably be best, and he did this in a tweet, which is never the best way to do it.
Bad idea.
And he's already had his mea culpa on that and released a clarification in a blog form. But basically he said the best outcome would be that Kavanaugh gets confirmed, but then steps down. And what he meant was that wasn't saying that Kavanaugh did do anything or didn't do anything, but if there's any chance for a little bit of healing where everyone gets a little egg on their face, but also gets a little bit of dignity to walk away with, and the country doesn't come apart at the seams. That was what he tried to do in a tweet, and in his blog post, he's acknowledged that trying to do that in a tweet, probably not the best thing.
Trying to do that in a tweet where the people who are reading it are generally all about politics and tearing each other apart.
Yeah.
Bad idea. That's why I put I think, because knowing Jordan, the little that I do, he's a deep philosophical thinker. So my feeling was, and it turns out it was right, that he's looking at that and saying, okay, in a normal world, in a good world, where we're all really trying to do the right thing, and if we really were all trying to do the right thing, I agree with him. It would have been the best thing to have Jordan say, or to have Kavanaugh say, thank you. Now, let's bring the country back together, nominate somebody else, and let's go through it. But the other side would have gone through exactly the same thing. You would have rewarded them in the end because they got it, because we're talking about the machines of destruction. So reality doesn't play a role. At some point, this 70% of America is going to stand up and say, shut up, both of you.
Are you shocked how many people in that 70% are just afraid to do that? Because when we do these meet and greets after the Peterson events, I think the number one question I get asked is, what can I do? I'm afraid to speak. And I cannot, I mean, I see this, you know, from people that I'm sitting this close to, and I see this look in their eyes of fear. And it's like, I don't think I'm that brave. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't. I'm just doing it. I can't explain it. But I don't wake up every morning and I'm like, what am I going to do today to fight Google and fight the political powers? Or what? I'm just like, I'm just doing what I think is right. That's it.
So that goes to, I brought my family 2011 to Auschwitz. And I did it, again, because I see over the horizon, I think. And we stood outside of the gates, and we had a prayer, and then I said, okay, we are here because we have to look at the ugliest thing man has done, and we have to decide who we are, who we're going to be. Because if you weren't prepared, and I don't mean prepare for that kind of stuff, I mean really know who you are, you will not stand when the jackbooted thugs come down the street. You have to know who you are and what you believe. So I had them read a story of the righteous of the nation. They could pick anyone who saved Jews and really try to get into their head. I lined up just a family kind of conversation with this sweet woman. She just died, I think, last week. She's 90 years old. She was a Christian. She was 16 years old when she saved the first Jew. Her whole family did it. It was remarkable. And we talked about it. Two things I learned on that trip. One, as we were leaving, I said to her, look, I have a responsibility that's different than most because I speak to so many people. And I said, I believe that people have that tree of righteousness in them. I think they have that goodness. They want to do the right thing. How do I water it? she told me something so profound. It's so game-changing. She looked at me so puzzled and she said, "You misunderstand. The righteous didn't suddenly become righteous. They just refused to go over the cliff with the rest of humanity. All you have to do is remember what you've always believed was true. And then just stand and just go, no, you guys are crazy. You don't have to be a hero. You're not a hero." She was looking at me. She wouldn't let me film her. She only let me take one picture of her. She wanted nothing because she's like, "I'm not a hero. I just remembered what was right." That's remarkable.
Do you think that the default position of humanity is to cower? That in these moments, it seems like it's a lot easier to cower, right? I mean, even now, like that's the thing. When people say this to me about how do I get brave or whatever, it's like we live in the freest place in the history of the world.
We don't need bravery
and
now.
if you're afraid now, imagine the second that thing gets turned a little bit, how afraid you're going to be. So it seems like fear, and I'm sure there's a psychological component to this, that fear does something in the brain that maybe bravery or maybe it really is about just knowing what you are and what you're made of.
Let me tell you two stories. First, fear shuts your brain down, okay? It shuts reason down. You're in fight or flight. And that's a good thing because you don't want to be going, well, I don't know, should I hit him a little harder? You
Right,
just are swinging.
Yeah.
So fear and anger, really bad. And that's why we're addicted to outrage. We will swing. You got to shake that or you won't think. It's biological. Two stories. The other person we met with in Poland was the chief rabbi. And he said, I think it was 7,000, there were 7,000 people that stood. And have you been to Auschwitz?
No, I haven't.
When you go, there's churches, I mean a block away.
Yeah.
There are houses everywhere, and they're old, they were there. And I left there and I was enraged. I remember crying and looking at the houses and screaming in my head, where the hell were you? Where were you? I meet with him and I said, how? Out of all the millions of people? And he said, you're thinking that's a small number? He said, that's an incredible number of people. People, you're in a scary movie, you look away. When something like this is coming, it is human nature to look away or to dismiss. And we have this gift of fear that warns us, but we use logic and sometimes we use it just to protect ourselves because, Dave, I don't think people are afraid of standing. I think they're afraid of knowing the truth. You look at the people who stand. The people who stand are the ones who are going, I learned something new. I learned something. It's changed me. They're not standing. You're not standing because you're brave and I'm going to take a stand. You're saying, wait a minute. Scales fell off my eyes. I just learned something. When you are inquisitive, when you are based in, wait a minute, I really want to know. You have already prepared to, but do you really? Mm-hmm. You and I know you know this. I think we've talked about it. Mm-hmm. I went through it and you went through it. You do come to a point to where you're saying, if I take another step, everything in my life could change. My friends might change. They might look at me differently. And you take that step and say, I want to know the truth. That's where people fail. If you can't take that leap, and that's why I really think you're seeing people like you're seeing the inquisitive, because that's in their nature, to question. Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And if you're like that, you most likely have already passed that line of uncomfortability because you've had things that you realized and you went, oh crap, okay, well, I guess I don't believe that anymore.
Yeah, and I just don't know how I could wake up and put stuff in my hair and look in the mirror and go,
That's why
I just don't know how I could do it, but I know some people do it, and then I think this is what Jordan would describe as sort of the slow road to hell. You will just diminish yourself every day of your life until the end.
You have to stop looking. You have to turn around, because it will always present you with the option. Oh, you saw it? You looked out and you saw them just lining up a family of Jews, shooting them? Okay, now what do? Once you see it, it presents you with the choice, do I go back to sleep or do I stand?
So I know it's very easy to always be like, okay, both sides are going crazy, they're equally horrible and all of those things. Like that's sort of like the easy way of doing it. I'm not saying that's what you're doing here, but that's sort of the easy way to do it. And we all fall in that trap sometimes, right? Because just for brevity's sake, sometimes it's easier to say that. But it seems to me that for all the people that absolutely despise Trump, that hate everything about the right basically has been in power for the last 2 years. There's a lot of good things happening in the country related to economics and the fact that we're not entering foreign wars, and there's some interesting things happening with North Korea and a series of other things. And the state has not used its power to silence anyone. What I fear, and this is why I don't think it's an even, oh, both sides are crazy thing, is that the left is about state power. And what I fear is they've said, well, half of the country is Nazis. We cannot be civil with them because they're coming to get us. And if these people took power, well, now we have everything that you just laid out, because they don't mind using the apparatus of the state to accomplish their goals. And I'm not saying Republicans are always right about this stuff and they screw up all the little government things that they should care about and all of that.
The left has become everything they said the Tea Party was, okay? That we weren't. They have become violent, they have become unreasonable, they want to silence people, and they will silence people. That's why you're seeing people begin to stand up and say, however, it's one of my fears with Donald Trump, and the great thing is he says a lot, and most of it never happens. You know what I mean? My fear is he has said, maybe we should look into the license of these companies, I don't think he means it, but you signal that to people on the right or the left. You're basically saying, yeah, that's on the field of play. It's not on the field of play.
Although there's an interesting libertarian argument whether the government should be giving licensing.
No. I don't think they should have license at all.
Right.
I certainly don't want the government to say, you know what, you've been a little harsh, so I'm going to look into your license. No, not at all. Get them out of that. Here's the thing that people aren't thinking about. Government is about to become, unless it marries into it, pretty inconsequential, because it will never be able to keep up with technology.
So is that the saving grace here?
No.
not that I was going to give Google a lot of
The left is concentrating their power in Silicon Valley, and that's where you can really silence people. The guy who wrote IBM and the Holocaust, I can't remember his name. Really brilliant guy, well thought out. We were talking and talking about how the Germans, how they silence people and how they cordon people off and then just get smaller and smaller groups. And then they eventually put you behind a wall in a ghetto. Well, they would build the wall higher and higher so people couldn't hear or see. Isn't that what Google and Facebook are doing? We're building digital ghettos. We have the ability now. You can speak all you want, Dave, but I'm changing the algorithm and you're not going to be heard. I mean, you look at what the deal with Facebook was. I promote them. I give them my 10 million listeners, and I say, hey, you can find me at Facebook. Let's communicate. Then they take those listeners that said, I want to hear from him.
Yeah.
And then they change the algorithm, and I can't communicate to my own people.
Yeah, and we know this is happening across the board. You probably saw my insane tweet thread about I just started retweeting all of these people, real people, not Russian bots and avatars. I was taking purposely real people with real names, with real pictures, and they're all saying they're unsubscribed. There were people who pay. It wasn't just the free people, it was the people who pay for YouTube Red or YouTube TV, still getting unsubscribed, and it's like, what did we all sign up for here? But dare I do you like the biblical analogies, I'll do one here. There was David versus Goliath, and I think Dave can take down Google. This Dave. I think there's a chance. I mean, I think that story, I'm being slightly hyperbolic, obviously, but I think that these things have become so big. I mean, this, I guess, is what the essence of the story was, right? That this Goliath, this Google, has become so big that it will crumble under the weight of its own crap, basically, that there will be enough people inside the broken machine that will wake up that...
I hope.
That individuals, basically, I hope. Look, all you got is hope, right?
Yeah, and you're 3 to 5 years away from it being a cage. I mean, their behavior with China, which I outline in the book, is pretty horrific. What the road China is going down is terrifying, and Google is right there with them. And that is evil. That is evil. They say don't be evil. Well, that is the definition of it. And if they just slowly, the guy who closes the door on the gas chamber was most likely a guy that was fixing trucks before the war and a normal guy. You don't suddenly become evil. You slowly move into it, especially if you're surrounded by a group of people that are all absolutely convinced that they are right and the other voice is wrong, and therefore we just have to filter them out. With AI and the way they are gobbling, it's really disturbing. And the problem is going to happen, we're going to start hitting massive job loss, probably 2020, 2021, 22. That's when you're going to really start to feel the effects of AI. When that happens, if you look at history, and we know it, all the politicians now are saying, I'm going to get those jobs back from China. No, you're not, because they're leaving China because they're getting too expensive in China.
Yeah.
So you're not getting those jobs back. And especially because AI and robotics are growing. We'll have 30% unemployment by 2030. 30% permanent unemployment. So you look at this, what do politicians always do? They got to find a bad guy. Well, right now it's China. But as soon as people realize that, wait a minute, it's Silicon Valley that's taking my jobs, the politician then says, it's those people that are building the robots. Unless those people also see over the horizon and become buddy-buddy with their friends in Washington, and they work together. Then you have a surveillance state that I don't think we ever get out of.